This is not a war story of a scream that lasted 5,000 years. I need you to understand something right now. Every single horror of the 41st millennium was born here. We are about to descend into the deepest, darkest pit of human history. Let's start with a single terrifying fact. The galaxy was broken. The warp storms were not mere disturbances. They were galactic-scale prison walls, impenetrable barriers of howling psychic energy and raw chaos. They didn't just make faster-than-light travel risky, they made it a physical impossibility. The stable routes were gone, swallowed by the tempest. The ancient webway gates, if humanity had ever used them, were sealed or worse. The effect was instantaneous and absolute isolation. Every star system, every human colony, every generation ship caught mid-voyage was violently, utterly cut off. Mars was alone, doomed. The glittering necklace of human civilization was not just broken. The string was vaporized, and the pearls were sent scattering into a boundless, roaring black sea. Communication ceased, trade vanished. The comforting hum of the galactic community became a deafening, static-filled silence. This was the Great Isolation, and it was the fertile ground where the seeds of 5 millennia of nightmare would grow. On 1,000 worlds, the same terrifying question was whispered, "Is anyone else out there?" And the answer, for 5,000 years, was a resounding, soul-crushing no. Humanity's fall was not uniform. It was a symphony of despair played in a million different, horrifying keys. Each isolated world became its own experiment in societal collapse. On some planets, it was a slow, quiet suffocation. Their technology, the life support systems, the agrodomes, the atmosphere processors, was complex, delicate, and utterly dependent on the lost knowledge of the STCs. When a component failed, there was no database to consult, no expert to call. They had been users, not engineers. Operators, not innovators. So, they watched as their world died. They applied ritual to failing machinery, whispering prayers to reactor cores as they cooled. They created myths to explain their dying tech. This is the true bloody birth of the machine cult. Not on Mars, but on 10,000 lost colonies, where the only way to cope with the loss of understanding was to deify the broken machine. Every chant, every anointing with sacred oil, every ritual of activation you see in the 41st millennium carries the ghost of this desperation. But on other worlds, the end was not quiet. It was fire and thunder. Nowhere was this more true than on Terra itself. Cradle of humanity became its charnel house. Poisoned by the radioactive and psychic fallout of the cybernetic revolt, cut off from all hope, Earth devolved into absolute anarchic violence. From the ashes rose the techno-barbarians. Forget noble savages. These were monsters wielding god tools. Warlords like Caligon of Ursh or Narthon Doom of the Pan-Pacific Empire ruled over fiefdoms of ash and radiation. They clad themselves in scavenged pieces of power armor, its systems half understood. They commanded war engines whose weapons could level mountains, attributing their function to blood sacrifice or personal divinity. This was the ultimate perversion of the Golden Age, its weapons in the hands of beings whose worldview had regressed to primordial tribalism. A tyrant might command a continent from a throne of welded-together tank holes, using orbital laser satellites to settle petty personal feuds.
Okay.
Terra was not a world. It was a continuous planet-wide battlefield. Its biosphere was a toxic soup. Its history was erased, replaced by competing myths of cruelty. For 5,000 years, the home of mankind knew only one law, the law of the atomics, the chain blade, and the strongest will. In such an environment, humanity did not just regress socially, it began to change physically. Stable genome, once a masterpiece of Golden Age science, began to mutate under the twin pressures of rampant radiation and the warp's leaking energies. Mutation became a plague. Not the controlled adaptations of old, but wild, terrifying, and often lethal changes. A child born with a vestigial claw, a population growing roomy, light-sensitive eyes under a poisoned sun, a strain of people whose skin hardened into chitinous plates, and the pure humans, those less affected or simply in power reacted with the oldest, most base instinct, terror of the other. The mutant was not just a competitor. They were a walking symbol of the universe's corruption, a living reminder that humanity itself was decaying. This sparked the Great Pogroms, systematic, genocidal campaigns to purge the changed. This isn't just background lore. This is the genetic memory of the Imperium. It's the fanatical hatred of the mutant, codified in the Imperial Creed and enforced by the Inquisition. Was born in these radioactive ruins, in the fear of a father holding a deformed newborn. But some changes were deliberate, or at least engineered by desperation. On high-gravity hell worlds, human stock was bred or bioengineered for brute strength and utter loyalty, creating the hulking, simple Ogren, intoxic. Competitive environments, smaller, faster, more cunning survivors emerged as the rattlings. The squats of the mining worlds, the pelagers of the water planets, these abhuman strains were not aliens, were humanity, forced by the long night to evolve in bizarre divergent directions just to see the dawn of another day. They were proof that in the dark, survival meant becoming something new, and often something that your ancestors would not recognize as human. And then there was the most dangerous evolution of all, the one that threatened not just societies but reality itself. The same warp storms that isolated humanity also thinned the veil between the material universe and the immaterium, when in the souls of certain individuals, a latent potential once rare and controlled reaped into waking life. The psyker had arrived. Imagine the horror. On a feudal world, a peasant girl discovers her dreams can twist metal. A child's tantrum on a failing hive world unleashes psychic fire. These were not sorcerers studying forbidden tomes. They were uncontrolled conduits, raw holes torn in reality. A single, untrained psyker could be a localized apocalypse there, fear attracting war predators, their pain unleashing demonic entities, their very existence a beacon in the storm. The reaction was a universal panic. They were burned as witches, drowned as daemon hosts, worshipped as dark gods by cults who saw their power as divine. The Age of Strife is littered with the ruins of worlds consumed not by xenos, but by their own emergent psykers. This is why in the 41st millennium, the black ships of the Imperium are so terrifyingly necessary in its eyes. It's not just dogma, it's trauma. It is the living memory of a time when one emotionally unstable human could damn an entire planet to a hellscape of screaming demons. And through it all, in the silent dark between the stars, eyes were watching. With humanity fractured, bleeding, and turned inward on its own nightmares, the xenos moved in. The orcs, ever present, found the isolated human worlds perfect playgrounds for endless brutal war. There was, crashed against planetary defenses that had no hope of reinforcement. But others were more sinister. Slaver empires offered false promises of technology or protection in exchange for entire populations. Ancient, mysterious species conducted horrific experiments on the lost children of humanity, seeing them as fascinating, broken toys. The Eldari themselves, descending into their own catastrophic decline, might pass through a human system like ghosts, leaving only confusion and strange ruins in their wake. Humanity was no longer a galactic power, it was prey. This experience, this 5,000-year period of vulnerability and predation, is the root of the Imperium's fanatical xenophobia. It is not an ideological preference. It is a hardened, paranoid survival instinct. The alien is not to be reasoned with. It is to be destroyed, lest it do to us again what it did in the long night. So let's take a step back and look at what the Age of Strife created. It created a species that had learned, in its very bones, that technology is an unfathomable god that must be appeased, not understood. The mechanicus, the different, the mutated, is a lethal disease to be purged. The hatred of the mutant, the psychic mind, is a gateway to hell that must be controlled or destroyed. 8. The fear of the psyker, the alien, is a predator that offers only betrayal and death. The imperial truths, xenophobia, unity, is not an ideal. It is the only possible defense against a universe that wants you dead. The imperial creed, this was the psychological wreckage. This was the trauma. And from the absolute depths of this trauma, from the worst of the techno-barbarian tyrannies, on Terra rose the only force capable of dealing with such wreckage. Not a philosopher, not a diplomat, a surgeon. Surgeon who looked at the cancer of old night and decided the only cure was total, brutal, uncompromising amputation. That surgeon was the Emperor of mankind. The Age of Strife was the disease. The Great Crusade, the forced reunification at the barrel of a bolter, The destruction of all xenos threats, the imposition of the imperial truth was the painful, horrifying, necessary surgery. The Imperium is not a noble empire that lost its way. It is a trauma response made manifest. It is a fortress built by survivors so deeply scarred that they welded the doors shut and vowed never to risk the outside again. It's cruelty, it's paranoia, it's fanaticism. These are not bugs. They are features. They are the lessons, written in blood and fire, of the long night. When you look at a commissar executing a fleeing guardsman, you are seeing the fear of fragmentation. When you see a tech priest chanting over a machine, you are seeing the terror of lost knowledge. When you hear a sermon condemning the mutant, you are hearing the echo of a 5,000-year-old scream of genetic horror. The darkness of the 41st millennium isn't just a setting. It is a diagnosis. It is the permanent psychological scar left on our species by the Age of Strife. The Emperor protects, yes, but never ever forget what he is protecting us from. He is protecting us from the memory of the long night, and that memory is the most terrifying thing in the galaxy. And from the ashes of this long night, a single golden figure would rise on Terra with a plan to end the suffering by conquering the entire galaxy. The stage is now set for the next and most epic chapter, the rise of the Emperor and the Great Crusade. But that is a story for another time.